Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 149, is the economy block, flying geese, and directional fabric. Please stay tuned for the winner of last week's batik giveaway. Let's get right to the episode. This episode was inspired by Sew Becca's 2025 quilt along, and she showed the economy block as her third month block, and she showed it using flying geese. And what she says on her website is, while there are multiple ways to construct this block, we're going to use the flying geese method to piece the outer triangles. This method helps keep the seams neat and makes the process even easier. She goes on to say if you have another way to make it, by all means go for it. And like she says, there's always more than one way to choose a block construction method. And sometimes we choose a block construction method based on the fabric that we've chosen, and we'll get to that later. Let's just start with the flying geese method. Here are two versions of your economy block. As you look at it, it's a square and a square and a square. Same thing here. What's the difference? The difference is these are flying geese and then squares in the corner. This method uses 17 pieces and has 16 seams. Here in these corners of the center square, you have 6 different fabrics meeting. And I know you can't feel it through the screen, but this is a good lump that needs to be worked on to make it flat so that when you're quilting, your needle doesn't break as it goes over it. In the square and a square and a square, or as Deb Tucker calls stacked squares, she has a technique sheet that gives you all the math to do many, many sizes of this. It's simply 9 pieces. It starts with 5 squares. This square stays intact. 2 squares of this one gets cut into half square triangles. And then the same thing, 2 squares of this cut into half square triangles. And it just is so much flatter. Here, if you see here, I'm not sure how close you're going to be able to see this, but it's just your square and then sewing down this one seam. So there's no big fat lump here. It's just all totally flat. I obviously pieced both these blocks. This took way longer to do than this one. And I always say you shouldn't choose things just because they're faster if it's an inferior method. To me, this is faster and a superior method to do it. I would take this way all day long over this way. Now, what could make you choose to do this method? Well, what if you wanted these to be different fabric, different color squares? That's going to be harder to do here by putting in a square here, and then you need half square triangles. At that point, you might as well do flying geese. So while I say this is a better method, you may choose to do this based on what your design, your aesthetic that you want it to be. Now, let's talk about flying geese and directional fabric. When you make flying geese, you can make them in a few different fashions. The way that Sew Becca did it was she had you cut rectangles and then put squares on either side of the rectangle, draw your line corner to corner, sew and cut off the excess. I like the fast flying geese method. So I cut one big square, 4 smaller squares, and sew in the fast flying geese method. Now, one reason I choose the fast flying geese method, to me, besides that it's faster, is this was the waist from the fast flying geese method. And this is the waist from cutting off the triangles. Now, some people will say, well, I like the triangles because I use them in another project. And that's fine, but that gives you another project you have to think about and put on your docket to do. When you do the fast flying geese method, the waist goes into our dog stuffing bag and we're done with it. We don't have to think about it any further. Now, Linda, who works here, says that the rectangle and squares is her favorite method because she wants to use more fabric. She puts this in the garbage or our dog stuffing bag. If your goal is to use more fabric, then the rectangle and squares method is better. If your goal is to use less fabric, you like the fast flying geese. So everybody's different. Everybody has different goals as they sew, and none are right or wrong. So let's talk about direction now. This was done using the rectangles and squares. So as you can see, these stripes go this way horizontally and these go vertically. Now we could have flipped them, it doesn't make any difference. But when you do the squares and rectangles, you get flying geese units that are in opposite directions. Now you can fix that by cutting some of your rectangles, half of your rectangles in one direction and half of your rectangles in the other direction. Then you can get them all to line up. If you do the fast flying geese method, you get 2 in one direction and 2 in the other direction. So you can line yours up all horizontally like I have it here, or you can turn this block and they'll be all vertically. So if you want your pieces with directional fabric to go all in the same direction, fast flying geese is a better option for you. Now you can, again, adjust like we can adjust over here. You could make 2 sets and lay your squares in the opposite direction that you did the first time, and then you could get 2 different sets, but then you'd be doing kind of 8 at a time. Now, let's say you care about the direction of your stripe, your directional fabric, but you want to do the stacked squares method. If you just go ahead and take a square and cut it in half diagonally, or I should say 2 squares and cut them in half diagonally, you would get something that looks like this. So see how it kind of makes a pinwheel? Now, I like that look, but let's just say we didn't like that look. What can you do? You can, and this would not be my preferred method, but if it was for the aesthetic of the block, you could cut your squares on the bias. These 2 squares were cut on the bias. Now, I didn't take super good care of the fabric before I cut it because it's just a sample for here. But if I was actually going to do this for a project, I would make sure that this was totally starched and flat and not going to move until I got the next border around it, because these are all bias edges. And besides having bias edges, the other issue with this one is that, what was I going to try to say? I had a thought in my head. Oh, a lot of waste. Duh, my hated thing, waste. Bias edges and waste in this method. So if it's me and I'm making something, I might say, if I don't like this look, I might not use a striped fabric for this position. I just might choose not to. So goes to say you can make decisions on your block construction for aesthetics and choose to have waste and say, because I like it that way, or just opt not to have that problem. It's really up to you. It's your quilt, it's your design, and you should have it come out exactly the way you want it to come out. If you do want to do the stacked squares, the square and a square and a square, which to me is the traditional economy block, be sure to add Deb Tucker's Stacked Squares technique sheet. She goes through 1-inch finished to 12-inch finished, and that should give you all the math. And that's the key in these. The math is ugly to do a perfect square and a square, because the center square is almost always, occasionally it is, but almost always not a size square that you will find on a ruler. So her tools give you those exact square sizes so that you can cut them perfectly. That's the episode. Let's get to the winner of the Batik giveaway. The winner of the Even More Batiks giveaway, and please, I apologize if I pronounce your name wrong, Pat Wormsbecker, PatWormsBecher. Please send me your mailing address to quiltersheaveninc@gmail.com, and I'll get that package right out to you. This week's giveaway is another pieced top, and it wasn't claimed before, so I'm going to try again. This is Night Sky by Jaybird Quilts. One of my staff made it. There's nothing wrong with it. It is the lap size, which says it's 56 by 65. And if you like this quilt top and would like to finish it, no strings attached, you can keep it for yourself, give it as a gift, give it to charity, whatever you want to do with it. If you can finish it, I'm happy to give it. So you know what to do to enter to win this. You want to like my video, you want to comment on the video, and you want to subscribe to my channel. And in the comment, write Night Sky, and you will be entered to win. So that's this week's episode. Until next time, happy sewing.